I'd like to begin with a quote. This is from one of my mentors, Dr. Havin To. He would say, "We are attentive to what we measure. We are attentive to what we measure." So just to get us thinking about this, I'd love for you to put in the chat, how do you measure a good day? What is a good day to you? What's a metric or an indicator of a good day? Just go ahead and put that in the chat. We are attentive to what we measure. So what is a good day for you? No wrong answers. Just go ahead and put that in the chat. What's a metric or an indicator of a good day? What is a good day to you? Focused activity, high energy, inner peace, lots of hugs, hot Cheetos and beans, getting some shit done on the farm. Did I get a chance to watch the sunset? Getting writing done, working in the garden, socializing, sports, feeling alive, curious, learning something new, walking in nature, being social with others, new learning, joy, students questioning things. Beautiful. So just shake that one out, and we're going to do one more, one more. How would you measure a good economy? What would be a healthy economy, a good economy? What would be the metrics or the indicators of a good economy? A good economy is, what's a metric? No KPIs, an economy that serves life as a living system, a healthy economy that flows to feed the whole system. What are the metrics of a healthy economy? Healthy land, healthy people, children at the core. One where all participants gain their fair share, not ones at the expense of others. One that is based on reciprocal abundance, or reciprocal abundant natural systems. One that supports the well-being of all, one where social values are supported, serving the people, the government leaves us alone to work together. One where there's sharing, reciprocity. Beautiful. So go ahead and shake that one out. Thank you for that, just to get us a sense of this question of what is a good economy. So I am offering today one model that really gets at the core of what is a healthy economy. And I would love to see just familiarity with Doughnut Economics at the beginning. So if you can just put in the chat, very familiar, not very familiar, or moderate familiar, or not familiar at all, just so I get a chance to see. So again, in the chat, familiar, not familiar, moderately familiar, just so we get to see. Okay, thank you. I'm seeing a lot of variety, everything from very familiar to not familiar at all. Okay, so I want to make sure we bring everyone along, but of course we will have time for questions and clarifications there at the end. So today's offering is called Doughnut Economics, California as a Living Laboratory of Regenerative Economics. And I want to ground this point, this model of Doughnut Economics within systems thinking, right? Because that's what brings all of us together as Capra Course alumni. So Donella Meadows, another wonderful systems theorist, just like Fritjof, Donella Meadows offered us leverage points, places to intervene in a system. And Morag will put the article in the chat, but this is one of my favorite articles from a point of systems thinking and systems change, particularly. And here she has the leverage points in order of effectiveness. And I really think of them as acupuncture points for systems change. And I really love to read the article and just reflect on where is the work that I'm doing or the work that I'm seeing in the world within these leverage points. It's just a really helpful schematic. And they're in order of effectiveness of changing the system And they're also a little bit in order of difficulty. So the ones down here, here I'll do a little, one second. The ones down here are maybe easier, but don't affect as much systems change. But the ones over here affect great systems change, but can be more challenging. And I'd like to focus here for a moment because this is where the model I'm offering today really flows. This one right here, changing the goal of the system. So the idea is that we can change the parameters, the feedback loops, the material stocks and flows, but really changing the goal of the system, that's truly transformative. That's a really high leverage point for systems change. And that's really where Doughnut Economics really operates. Even higher than that are changing the mindset and paradigms of the system, which of course is so deeply embedded in the Capra course and in systems thinking in general. Like thinking in systems is a mindset shift. And then the highest leverage point, just in case you're curious, is the power to see that even a paradigm is a paradigm. So to kind of transcend paradigms and to kind of hold them lightly so that we don't get dogmatic and proselytizing. So this model today I'm offering is goal of the system, changing the goal of the system. And really what you all offered as what is important for an economy, that's really getting at the goal. What ought to be the goal of the system? So I'm coming today, not in my Capra course role, but in my role as part of the California Doughnut Economics Coalition. And we're a worker self-directed nonprofit, which means we try to operate using regenerative economics in our organizational practice. So it's, if you know a worker cooperative, it's like a worker cooperative, but for a nonprofit. So it's horizontal governance, shared decision making, sociocracy. And our vision is to create a California where people and planet thrive together. And our strategy is to create this Doughnut Snapshot of California, which I'll be sharing, to really shift the economic narrative for California. That's the like paradigm level shifting of what is the economy for. Collaborate with change makers and to spark Doughnut initiatives and policies across the state at all different levels. So what is Doughnut economics? And this is particularly for those who said not very familiar. So first, I just want to appreciate Kate Raworth, who I'd say is the root teacher of Doughnut Economics, although it really is now a global community, and there's people, including on this call, who are really practicing and offering, advancements in Doughnut Economics around the world. But Kate Raworth is really the root teacher of it. And her book, which is really seminal to this work, is called Doughnut Economics: 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. And if you're looking for a fun book to read on economics or a book club book, I really recommend this book. It's a great one for that. So what is Doughnut Economics? I would say, to the point of the systems thinking and the systems change, it is a different goal of an economy. It is a holistic goal for an economy based on the well-being of people and nature. So instead of the goal of an economy just being blind growth or infinite growth or just growth at any cost, the goal of Doughnut Economics is meeting human needs, but staying within consideration of the needs of the ecosystems or the planet. It's a measurement tool, right? I opened this talk with we're attentive to what we measure. So it is a measurement tool. So it's an alternative to gross domestic product, which is often seen as the metric or the tool for measuring the success or the progress of an economy. It's also a policy screening tool. So you could take a policy at any level, local, regional, city, state, country, global, and you could say, how would this policy affect the donut? How would it affect our goal of getting to meet the needs of the people, but staying within consideration of the needs of our ecosystems? It's also a business framework. So it's inclusive of businesses, saying businesses, organizations, endeavors can be helpful to helping us reach well-being for people on the planet. And here's how. And then finally, it's a global community. And the global community is really known for being on a platform called the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, which Morag's going to put in the chat. But that's a free community to join, and there's lots of groups all around the world and different people you can connect with. So if you're not already on that, it could be a great way after this talk to say, who else is asking these questions or thinking about this where I live? So this is doughuteconomics.org and the Doughnut website, the Deal website. So when we say the donut, this is what we mean. So this is the donut. And it's a couple things. So in the inner part of the donut, we can think of as the donut hole. These are the indicators of social well-being. So this is the meeting of the human needs, right? So these come from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And you can ask wherever you are in the world, let's take a random place like London, and we can say how many people in our London community have access to adequate water, have access to healthy food, have access to meet their health needs. And we can kind of shade them in based on whether or not those needs are being met by all the people in our community. But it's not enough to think about the social, right? We also have to think about the ecological, and that's the outer ring of the donut. So these are the planetary boundaries, and they come from the Stockholm Resilience Center's planetary boundaries. And these are essentially the tipping points of our planet or our ecosystems. So our planetary system can withstand some pressures, some changes, but after a certain point, they tip into alternate states. So this is what I mean by staying within consideration of the needs of our planet. So we have climate change, ozone acidification, chemical pollution. And although these are on the planetary level, they can be adopted and scaled for cities, bioregions, states, countries. If we are not meeting human needs, then we're in shortfall. If we are overshooting the needs of our planet, we're in overshoot. And the ideal, the sweet spot, is this part, the donut. You can imagine some sprinkles or whatever your favorite flavor of donut is. This is called the safe and just space for humanity. So this is saying, what if the goal of the economy were to meet all these human needs, to have no shortfall, to reach that social foundation, but to not go over our ecological ceiling, to not go into overshoot, and to be within the safe and just space for humanity? And then how we do that is the regenerative and distributive economy. So in this frame, there's actually no countries that are meeting human needs and staying within the needs of the ecosystem. So this is where we need to be, and this is where all the countries are. Okay, we need to be where there's low overshoot, so low impact on our planet or our ecosystems, and high social thresholds where human needs are met. So in this sense, Kate Raworth would say there is no developed country. Just notice what that does. There is no developed country. There's no places in the world that are meeting all their human needs, but staying within consideration of the needs or the well-being or the health of their ecosystem. Wow. So there's a mindset shift right there. There are donuts worldwide at many different levels. All these dots are either organizations and networks or cities and regions that are adopting the donut. So you can kind of see wherever you are in the world, there's likely someone already thinking about this and maybe even working with others to create a donut. The Amsterdam donut, the Melbourne donut, the Scottish donut, there's several, and they're all on this Deal website again. So this is our global donut. If you're going to ask like, where are we at? So you see a lot of red. There are a lot of shortfall in our social needs and a lot of ecological overshoot. And I know you all can feel this and already know this already, but this really gives us a health indicator, like a check-in of how are we doing planetary wise. This is our global donut. We have the US donut, and we in California were wondering, what is it for California? And then having that image and that idea of the donut snapshot could then get us to come together and say we need a regenerative economics to get us within the donut. So this is what introduces the California donut, and Morag's going to put in the chat the link to our snapshot and our long report, which we've just released. So to develop the California donut, we had 200 indicators that we considered. We chose 24 for the social foundation. We chose 18 for the ecological metrics, and we created one California donut to assess the state's performance. So this is the California donut here. This is what we came to. So you can see there's a lot of shortfall, there's a lot of overshoot. In fact, we found after doing this process, 100% of social indicators fell short of delivering basic needs for all people. So in every category we are not meeting 100% of our people's needs in California. And 89% of our ecological indicators are an overshoot. So just feel into what this says, right? There's a lot of people who say California economy is strong, is robust, is, doing really well. It's really healthy. Is it? Right? It's interesting to look at it this way and to say, what if the goal was to get us within the donut? It really reframes how we're doing and what is our work that is needed to be done. This is our donut unrolled. And again, it's in that report. So there's a lot of detail here. But we go through each of the indicators that we chose and what is enoughness. That's another interesting point because each one of these you think of where we're at and then where do we want to be, right? How much room is there needed for our work to be done? So this is our social foundation. And I'll just give one example. So for housing, we were like, okay, what do we want to measure for housing in California? So we measured homelessness rates. So at a given point in time, how many homeless people are there? Okay. So we found that there was a 36% shortfall in housing access based on homelessness rates. We also wanted to know what about housing cost burden? So we looked at how many people in California are paying more than a third of their income on their housing, whether that's their mortgage or their rent. The idea is that if they're paying more than a third, then they have a housing cost burden. And so there's a 55% shortfall in housing affordability based on a housing cost burden. So this just gives you a little taste. And for each of these, we have data points we chose, enoughness, etc. Here's our ecological ceiling. So this is the outer part of the donut. And again, the report will go into all the details. And here's one ecological example, biodiversity loss. So we looked at, there's actually 59% overshoot in protected areas. So there's biodiversity loss in protected areas. We were able to find that metric and plug that in. And then animal and plant species at risk, 947% in overshoot. So severe overshoot. So this is kind of another example of the ecological. And again, we go through each of these in this report. So I want to invite some invitations going forward and then hear from you all what your kind of questions and what you want to know more about, because I can go into any more detail in any of these elements. So one invitation, as I shared that we worked on a California donut, is how could this model be helpful wherever you live, right? So whether, again, it's your bioregional level, your city, your state, your country, would it be helpful to create this donut snapshot, to do this work to assess how are we doing and meeting our human needs and staying within the needs of our ecosystems? And just to share that after we created the California donut, now we've dove into local areas. So personally, I'm working on a San Francisco donut because that's where I was born and raised and currently live. So we're doing a San Francisco donut. We also have a San Diego donut group. We have a Petaluma donut group. We have a Santa Cruz donut. We have a San Jose donut. So it's really like proliferating and popping up all over. But you can think about this at whatever area you're at, getting together a group and creating a donut snapshot. You can also create a policy screening tool. So, after you have this donut snapshot, asking, okay, how does this law, how does this initiative, how does this policy, how does this do what's actually important to us, meeting human needs and staying within consideration of the needs of our planet. So creating a policy screening tool, and this really shifts that paradigm or mindset. Oftentimes people think, oh, we just need policies that increase, jobs or increase growth, right? Economic growth, right? But if that's what we're attentive to, if that's what we're measuring, then that's what we'll go for. But if we're looking at the donut, then we'll look for policies that are helping us meet human needs, especially where there's key shortfall, and helping us stay within consideration of our ecosystems. Creating an educational campaign. So I know some people wrote in the chat that they're educators. So there's tools for teaching doughnut economics at every level, whether it's grade school, middle school, high school, college. And again, the donut really is like an entry into this regenerative economics world because it's very post-growth and it's very based on systems change. So creating an educational campaign at whatever level that you're at. starting a Doughnut Economics book club. And if nothing else, maybe that's a great place to start just because it brings more familiarity with the model and also the ways of thinking like a 21st century economist, and also the how do we get within the donut? What is that regenerative and distributive economy that we then need to implement, that we need to let rise to be able to get us within the donut wherever we are? And then finally, for anyone who's interested in like a livelihood, a livelihood idea or endeavor, there's many ideas for offering Doughnut Economics business consulting and workshops. And on the Deal website, there's all these open source tools for leading a Doughnut Economics business workshop or becoming a consultant in this work, really just helping people implement and bring these materials to life wherever they are. So these are the invitations that I want to offer here. And I'm going to close here, and I'm just going to open it up for our group discussion and conversation. And what I'd love to know is if there's any more you want to know about, because I know that was a lot, but we have varying degrees of familiarity. So what do you want to know more about? But also, how is this relevant to you and your life and your work? How does this weave in? How does this connect? And then, of course, since we're the Capra Course community, where is this in the systems view of life in general? Where does this connect with what we've been talking about, what we've been learning about, and what we've been studying together? So I'm going to hand back to you, Morag, for opening it for questions and discussion.
Thank you, Della. So please feel free to use that raise hand function that you'll find down the bottom to come in to have a chat. And great, Tom, welcome.
Hi. So I have extremely limited understanding or exposure to Doughnut Economics. I've heard about it a number of times, in places like the Capra Course, but nothing in depth. But if I wanted in my community to start looking at this, not having a background in economics or community planning or anything like that, what would I do?
Yeah. So one thing I might suggest starting with is going on the Doughnut Economics Action Lab website and just seeing if there's anyone else near you, right? Because that's how we started, was there were a couple of people in California and we're like, let's get together. So just see, maybe there's already people hosting groups or, book clubs or gatherings. So that's important to know that you're not alone. And sometimes you are the first, and that's okay too. And then I really would recommend the book as the starting place, because the book really does that kind of intro overview. And then from that place, you can kind of sense what would be most helpful. Like, do you want to do something in education? Do you want to try to work with the local government? Do you want to try to work with the business community? There's many different entry points, but doing a snapshot process of your community could be a really good exercise. You would say to yourself, okay, here's the, social foundation. What are the metrics that are out there? Like, what is housing in my community? What are the needs? Where are we at? What would be ideal? And it's a good thing to do with others, and especially groups that are working on this. Like if you have a homeless shelter or a housing association, like those people would already be thinking about this. So doing it collaboratively could be really useful. But then once you have that, you can then use that to set the direction of getting within the donut. Does that help, Tom? Oh, you're muted. Yeah, I'm seeing a thumbs up. Okay, thanks, Tom.
John, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was great. I know a little about Doughnut Economics. I had a Zoom with Kate Raworth once. But my question is, so there's the economic system that everybody is familiar with, which pretty much runs our lives. And as Hazel Henderson said, economics is just politics in disguise. And so, how are these organizations, your network, which sounds wonderful, and the little I understand about the donut and how it works, I think it's marvelous. I mean, I think it's great. But how are you, as a group or individually, confronting the fact that that the political realities of either in communities or at a national level or anything, is it, and I'll just ask the question and then I'll get off. Is it trying to work in communities and develop your system there at whatever level you can get it and hoping it moves on? Or is it trying to influence actual economic thinkers and people at universities? And I mean, I know Kate is involved with, universities. So do you get where I'm going? Is that enough?
I do, yes. So I have some good news that I have really found, and not just me, but many people have found that the donut is very, well, it's understandable because it has the image, right? It's not just like theory, but you have the image. And Kate really talks about speaking in images is helpful for communication. So the image is helpful, but also that it's politically actually very feasible. Like, I don't think you really heard me say socialism, like you didn't really hear me say any of the words that could trigger people. Instead, you heard me talk about meeting human needs, staying within the needs of our ecosystem, well-being, right? And these are actually words that people on all sorts of the political spectrums can really get behind. So politically feasible, it's very politically feasible that we found around the world. And to give a couple of examples of implementation, so in Amsterdam, it was the local government. It was the like city level local government that said, we're going to implement doughnut economics. And several other places, it is at that governmental level. Other places, like in California, we're a coalition. So we're volunteers and people of all various backgrounds and groups, but we also are in communication with the governor's office, right? So there's different pathways that you can go through, but I totally agree that at the governmental level, the policy level, the political level, they do have a lot of sway of thinking about what's the, California economy in 50 years, right? And like, how are they measuring success and how are they talking about progress? So getting this into that conversation is actually really important to get at that political level, but it's not the only road. So I'm saying like if you don't have any political connections and you're a grassroots organization or you're in academia or you're in the business community, you can still have an entry point into this. So I would say that. But, in general, if we just zoom out here for a second, what this is really trying to get at is not new. You all are probably very familiar with the limits to growth, right? And the idea that we are going beyond our planetary boundaries. And so this is kind of a new or a different way of saying that. Like we need to go beyond growth, right? That growth is growth at all costs and that our planet can grow forever. And we need to change the goal of our economy to well-being for people on the planet. So post-growth economics, new economics, cooperative economics, solidarity economics, it's all part of ecological economics. This is really connected with all of those movements. So yeah, it needs to be at the political level, but it also needs to be in the whole dimension of economics in general. Like this needs to be brought into mainstream economics textbooks, classrooms, etc. So many entry points, politically feasible and politically popular is what I'd answer to that.
I just dropped into the chat
Good. Thank you.
Canoe Economics, which when I was interviewing Kate at the last Festival of Wild Ideas, that's how she was describing it after talking with Indigenous communities in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and saying, yeah, this is kind of based on how we've always thought about this. So it's not new. It's like we knew this. And it's like bringing it into a frame that now is contemporary. So I just wanted to drop that in there. Thanks, John. Carmen.
Hi, everybody. Greetings from Medellin, Colombia. Before I ask the question, I just want to say that I am a graduate of Delia Duncan's course in regenerative livelihood, and since it's coming up, I highly recommend it. It was really, really wonderful. Thank you, and great to see you, Delia. So what I struggle with, my friends, is both of you, Delia and now Morik, have both indicated we already know this. We've already studied this. This is like another way of studying what we've already studied. So where I struggle is, when are we going to move from studying to actually changing the system? And how do we do that? That's one thing that I just want to put out there, because that's, we're running out of time, and do we have time to keep studying, or do we actually have to go, do we need to go and actually change the system before it's too late? That's number one. Number two, I wanted to ask you, I'm in Colombia, in Medellin, and uh, they're talking about it. I was in a meeting this week, and there's a conversation around donuts economics. But the point about, how do you get together? How do you get at it? Do you go through the government? Do you set up a group of volunteers? So I wanted to ask you, do you know if there's anything going on over here? Because I'm new. I just moved here like a month ago. Do you know if there's anything going on in Colombia or in Latin America, or I just go to the Action Lab and find out? I go there, right?
Yes, I don't know in Colombia specifically, but yeah, that would be the best place to look. And then, going backwards, how do you start this? And, this is what was asked before a little bit. You can really start wherever you are at. So if you bring together a group of volunteers, other community members, that's a great place to start. If you do have, a school that you're connected with, you can start it there. If you have a business community, you can start it there. And if you're connected with any local government, you can start it there. In Petaluma, in California, it was the local government that reached out to us, and now we're working with them. In San Diego, it was a business organization that said, come help us bring this. And then in California, like I said, it's just a group of volunteers that are bringing this. So it's really different entry points wherever you're at. But I really hear you on the point of going from theory to action. I think it's really intentional that the Doughnut Economics Action Lab has that word action. And there are so many tools. And I saw in the chat, somebody said, can you give an example of an educational framework? There's all these educational tools. Like, there's a whole even wing of it that is curriculum, right? Curriculum for Doughnut Economics in schools. And again, at every level. So you can really get into action in that. But I will say, to the point of what I just shared, the snapshot to me is really the first step. Doing that picture, that point in time, that health assessment of how our economy is doing. And that in itself is shifting, right? It shifts perspectives and, changes the goal of the system. But then you do have to get within the donut, right? So that is the action part. And that, again, I said, is the regenerative and distributive economy. And that really is, it's related to the Doughnut economics world, but it's not the Doughnut economics world. So it's related to circular economics, cooperatives, land trusts, share shops, and like the true sharing economy, the gift economy from, indigenous thinking. So there's all these other things that then would get us within the donut, but to know where we're at and to be in agreement of where we're actually at and then where we want to go, that's kind of the first step that I'm offering from that donut image.
Well, and that's very, very valuable, and because it all starts with consciousness, right? With awareness, just creating the awareness. We got to start somewhere, and okay. And even in this group, that is so aware, and we're at a different, I suppose, consciousness level. Even then, when you ask, well, where are you? Some are, we are in all kinds of levels. So that's great. And then the last question I wanted to ask you is about this Hispanic group donut. So it doesn't have to be locally, it doesn't have to be location based. It could be different groups. What is this Hispanic group donut? How does that work? Did you say that? I wrote it
I don't
down.
think I said that. Maybe I misspoke.
Oh, okay.
But I will say again, on the Deal website, there are like affinity groups, like you said, like someone in business and education, and then there are more place-based. So yeah, I would say wherever, like if you want to look for Colombia, look for Colombia. If you want to look for, people like you and how they're bringing it into the donuts, then you'll find that too.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carmen. Corinne, hello.
Hi, I came in late, and maybe you addressed this, but I was very interested in, to address the other comments. I just wanted to briefly say I'm a permaculture teacher, and I teach these concepts during the permaculture class, and people have a hard time getting their wits around it. We do little acting out sessions so that they can see how it would work in their life. And, it's a process to get people to get their wits around how do you live within your means and, as an individual and in your community. But I was wondering, when you were showing the statistics and the diversity, I think it was there was 900% on, how do you take a statistic like that and present it to someone and say, we need to handle this, and how are we going to handle it? Because that's a huge number. It's like overwhelming, and anyway.
Thanks, Corinne.
Yeah. Well, first to your point about, sustainable living for each of us, there are people who've said, what's a personal donut? And they've even created a tool so we can each do our personal donut assessment. So there's some creative things, again, on the Doughnut Economics Action Lab website you can check out there. But yes, the collective measurements, I will have to say, after doing the California one of the big surprises to me was the meaning making of it. Like, we worked on it, we offered it, and then there were people who said, well, who's to blame? Right? Like, or what's the it's just interesting what meaning people make from it. And I hear you that people can look at it and be very discouraged, see, wow, we're in shortfall in every social category. We're in, huge ecological overshoot, to your point, 900% above. It's very, disappointing, right? But I mean, for me, I don't have that sense. For me, it's more just a realistic picture of where we're at and where work needs to go. And I think, to your point, those kind of indicators, what they tell me is like where our work needs to go, where our capital, where our energy, where our businesses, where our attention, like that's where it needs to go, is these places where we are in severe overshoot or severe shortfall. So if you think about it, like the donut really could then guide, budget, like the state budget or the policies, or, which organizations should get the most funding or the most volunteers, right? It can also be helpful for any of us who are looking for like a livelihood direction. I want to contribute, but where, right? We can look at the donut and go, oh my gosh, biodiversity loss, we're at that level. I want to contribute there to get us within the donut. And you can see it's a really collective, collaborative effort, because not one of us is going to, be the one who gets us within the donut. It's a collective effort. But I think it really can reorient our time, energy, our capital, our attention, and our livelihoods.
Thank you, Corinne. Mansoor, welcome.
Thank you, Della, for all this information that you gathered and your commitment to go through this paradigm shift in economy and everything. My question is that we are byproduct of amazing creative process when we look at all the major supernovas that happen, that eventually we have this planet Earth and then us. Why we are acting like this, that in all those categories, we are almost 100%, especially on safety and safe and just, as you mentioned. Why we are acting like this? Why we are not acting equivalent to this creative process that brought us here? Who is getting all this information? Actually, what we are using to get all this information that you provided is our brain, actually, that we are using to come out with these informations. That we are not doing safe, we are not acting on basis of safety and justice. But is our brain that is coming to this conclusion, does that unjust and unsafe relationship with our body at the same time? It uses the same relationship, which is self-assertiveness, short-term gain, domination, liability management that we are doing in economy, earth, and everywhere too. It does it in our body at the same time too. It goes only for its own addiction to whatever it is and forgets about the whole body. And that injustice starts within us. And then we apply to any network that we are participating in any scale. So it's basically we are trying to change, but we are not looking deeper to see where the source of problem is, that domination of left side brain that we created through our self-consciousness process, that it was part of self-consciousness process of the earth. Now that linear model that we created and linear relationship of self-assertiveness, short-term gain domination is dominating our brain, and it doesn't allow the right or left to work together to creatively come out with economy, politics, and relationship that is equivalent to the creative process that we brought out here. And without getting to that first and understanding that it's just same network all around in any scale, in our body network to any scale. Without looking at that, we are just trying to bring all the shortfalls of our action that we are doing, which is true. We know that this linear model is not holding anymore and is cracking and is just shifting to higher level of consciousness of human being, at the same time, higher level of participating with our body, not to be just to our body network. We normally, right now, I have an eye problem that is leaking. I mean, my veins inside leaking blood, and I don't need to. I have to somehow avoid TV and Zoom and everything too. But my brain, since addicted to information, it wants always to, discover, talk, and all the stuff that I'm doing. I'm just sitting here for 1 hour and doing it without looking at the whole body, that you need to take care of your eye first, because eye is the one is providing all the information for you, Mr. Brain. And just be justice to your body first, and in any network you are participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Mansoor.
Thank you, Mansoor, and thank you for the work that you do on this. Really, like, what's the deeper, reasoning? And one thing I'll answer from Kate Raworth's perspective. One thing that she points to as to why we're not living in this creative flow and why we have this difficulty is this idea from mainstream economics of who we are as human beings. So in mainstream economics, we are taught that we are Homo economicus, rational, self-interested beings who are out for our own self-interest and disconnected from nature, right? And if we believe that, then that's how we operate and act, and that's how our systems are created. So if we can, as Morag said, remember or, know from the past that we are actually part of the web of life, that we are interconnected interbeings, then we can have a new economics or a different economics from that reality. And I'll just share one more slide here that, this going upstream, which is this other theme for my work from the podcast, is when we go upstream from suffering, we have, supremacies, right? Human supremacy over nature, patriarchal supremacy, white supremacy, global north supremacy. But from supremacy going upstream, we have separation from the separation from nature, separation from each other. And then we have the small self or the egoic self. And so the answer, and also the small self and all of this, is the Homo economicus. But then we have the remembering ourselves to the web of life, which offers then the sense of the ecological self or the eco self, which leads to reconnection, which leads to solidarity and thriving. And this is where that Doughnut Economics economy is an economy of the ecological self, of reconnection, and of solidarity and thriving. So thank you again for your comments on that, Mansoor.
Thank you. And I agree fully with you. And all I'm trying to hear say that if our brain is the one that is giving us this information that we are not safe and we are not aware, how come he's not itself aware of it, that he's doing it in our body network the other way, rather than being safe and justice? And that injustice starts within us first in any scale, but we blame it to outside rather than within us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mansoor. Gustavo, welcome.
Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you yet, Gustavo.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Just a question, as an economist, I mean, how do you foresee, I mean, working on the donut model as how to define the goal and the metrics and all of that? How do you foresee making this mainstream somehow? Because I think it would need to go into business models, for instance, new business models, and then new ways of financing them. And I don't see, for instance, any of the 200 metrics, none of them have to do with financing or with this more mainstream way of seeing things, but within this new model.
Yes. So, okay. One thing I'm hearing from your question, or one thing that's connecting with me is, yeah, where is finance and where even is growth? And so this model is actually what's called growth agnostic. So instead of being pro growth or pro green growth or degrowth, it's actually saying, what if growth was not the end goal, but a means to an end? And we can say the same thing about finance. So finance can actually finance business, entrepreneurship. It can help us get within the donut. It can actually help us direct capital and investment and flow to the organizations, institutions, endeavors that help us meet the human needs and also get creative and technological of helping us stay within our planetary boundaries. So this is not exclusionary of finance or of investment or even growth. It's saying let growth serve getting us within the donut and not growth be an end goal in itself. But I really hear you. It needs to be within mainstream economics. It needs to be within business, acumen and business trainings. And it needs to be in the mainstream rhetoric. Like I said, the model and the way that it's formed, because it has the planetary boundaries and the sustainable development goals, is like a lot of people actually get behind it. So I think it is really becoming part of mainstream economics. So like one other thing you don't know about me, but I'm also a gross national happiness master trainer from the Kingdom of Bhutan. Now that is not getting into mainstream economics because it has Buddhism and, it's like a very specific, it has spirituality, but Doughnut Economics, very similar in the vein of systems change, but it's much more understandable and much more digestible to a wider audience. So I actually do think it is getting quite mainstream right now.
Thank you, Della.
Thank you.
I noticed that we have 3 more questions, and we're coming towards the end of the time. So just to note that, Carol, please come in.
Okay, thank you. I'll be quick. It's not actually a question. I just want to comment on the fact that I really didn't know so much about Doughnut Economics. So thank you very much, Della, for what you've said. And just to point out, I work in the field of adult education, retraining educators, and part of that is to try and shift their worldview. So I can't assume that they've all, understand systems. I'm trying to teach them systems. One of the big gaps that is not just there, but across education, is addressing economics. It's not something that's in the general curriculum of international education, which is where I work. It's something that's kind of avoided. And if we do come across it, it's just a criticism of neoliberalism. And then, the excuse for that is that there isn't another system. There isn't another way of looking at it. So I think this is so valuable, such an important model that can fill that gap, that there is an alternative. And the international education does look at indigenous cultures and says, once upon a time we understood it all and now we don't. But that doesn't really give any impetus, if you know what I mean, because we're not indigenous in that sense anymore. But this really does offer a link between that. So thank you very much. Just want to say how valuable I think it can be, will be.
Thank you so much. And actually, yeah, just to clarify from Morag's point, the regenerative livelihood course is actually just ended. The next course I'm teaching is on economics. It's on regenerative economics. So I just put that in the chat. But it's all about regenerative and cooperative economics and economic systems change. So if people are interested in that, the link is in the chat. But yeah, thank you for adding that, Carol. I totally agree. And just to say, Kate Raworth says, like, we all need to be thinking about economics. So don't be afraid if you're like, I'm not an economist or I'm not. It's like we're all a part of getting us within the donut, right? All of us have a part to play. So, and in this way, we're all managing our collective, economy together. So thank you.
Sorry for putting the wrong link in, Della. I'm glad you noticed that and put the right one in. Welcome, Claude.
Hello, do you hear me? Okay, thank you for your presentation. And I live in Sherbrooke in Quebec province of Canada. And Canada decides to increase its military spending, listening to, I don't, you know who, from 2% to, from 1% to 2 and then to 5%. That will mean $115 billion soon. So the city wishes to attract some money from the military spending for its industry. This decision has not been democratic, and we people from the people, peaceful people, we don't want that, and I don't know how we should what we should say to the municipal council to suggest them to think about the Doughnut Economics instead of the military spending increase in the city. I don't know if it's clear enough.
It is very clear. Excellent question. And
Okay.
I'll answer it with an anecdote. I was once knitting, and my brother said, "Why are you knitting? Don't you know that's bad for the economy?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Making my own sweater or scarf is not good for the economy. But if I get in a car and I drive to a Walmart and I buy a sweater that was made by sweatshop labor, that's good for the economy." And what do we mean by good for the economy? We are attentive to what we measure. So if we're measuring the health of the economy by GDP, then yeah, me getting in a car and driving to a Walmart is good for the economy. The same with the military. Wars, human trafficking, oil spills, ecological devastation is good for the economy, especially weapons and wars, because you use it once and it's gone and you have to buy more. It's inherently not reusable or regenerative. So when you're measuring the health or the success or the progress of an economy by GDP, yeah, you're going to increase wars and military spending. So the core thing is we need to move beyond GDP. That is not a helpful or healthy metric of the health of our economy. So I hear you on the difficulty of this, but the question or the offering is, if we're measuring GDP, yes, increasing our military budget is good for the economy. What do we truly want our economy to be for? And when people ask this at all levels, at all places in the world, they come up with something similar to what you all said. The meeting of human needs, staying within consideration of the needs of our ecosystem, or the health or the well-being of people on the planet. That's what's really important to people. Well, then measure that. Right? That's what this is. And the donut offers a measurement tool for that. And then you can also do the policy screening that I mentioned, where it's like, okay, if we raise the military budget from this to this, what would be that impact on this donut model? And I already know I don't even have to do it. It's not going to help the donut. It's not going to help us get within the safe and just space for humanity, right? It's going to hurt the planet and it's going to hurt the people. So changing the goal, changing the metrics, and offering the donut would be a really helpful thing at that point, for sure.
Thank you, Claude. Final question. I realize we're pretty much bang on time, but we can just stretch for a couple of minutes. And thank you, Brett. Welcome.
Hello there. Can you hear me? I'm not actually able to show my
Yes,
video
we can
'cause
hear
I'm in
you.
a public place. Good. So my question, and I think Gustavo actually, his question kind of touches that. My question is really, is it part of the theory, is the money in banking, the debt-based, interest-bearing, debt-based money in banking system part of this theory, or is it sort of assumed? Scholars of the field who look at very carefully say, no, there's no way this money in banking system can be part of a future because it's totally tied to debt, totally tied to extraction, growth through interest and all that. And it also shapes a lot of things about our behavior and our attitudes and our beliefs. So I'm just want to say, is there something in the theory about money and banking, or is it something that is a kind of open space for exploration? Because there's definitely a different view out there in scholars who actually have focused on it and look at it and feel passionate that it needs to change. There are also movements, people actually working to try to change the money and banking system. And I just want to see, is there a connection there? Or, what is the connection? What is the theory as part of
Yeah.
Doughnut Economics?
Yes. So like I said, money banking can be a capital input or a flow to help us get within the donut. But then there's also the piece of how do we get in the donut? We need the regenerative and distributive economy. So within the regenerative and distributive economy, there are alternatives to current banking models, such as the public banking movement, such as demurrage currencies, complementary currencies, like addressing interest and addressing investment and addressing the stock market and all of that. So I would say, again, it's a related area to doughnut economics. It's really like how we get within the donut. How do we address the growth addiction within finance and banking and investment? Certainly related, but I would say it's like an additional movement component to getting us within the donut. And it would rely on all the things that you're talking about and the wider movement for changing our relationship to money, finance, investment, et cetera.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brett. And thank you so much, Della, and everyone for being here today. I wonder, Della, whether you had any closing comments that you'd like to share with us.
Well, I'll just share with, how I started, because I really love to make it personal. So, we are attentive to what we measure. So just to, sometimes we're not even aware of how we're measuring a good day or a good life or a healthy livelihood, right? But the health of our economy. And so just being aware of what we've, subconsciously taken on, or how we are measuring, and also what we want to unlearn. So to just like leave this meeting with looking at, the business section of newspapers, or the progress report of a business, or, or like a mainstream economics tech book, and say, how are they measuring, right? And what is the goal? Right? And what is important to them? What is progress? And then being able to unlearn what is unhelpful to human and ecological flourishing. And then to ask ourselves, what is it we want to measure? What do we want to be attentive to? What is a good life? What is a good day? What is a healthy economy? And then to see that each of us in our livelihoods, our work, our activism, our studies, that we can each contribute to that and getting us within the donut, the safe and just space for humanity.
Thank you so, so much, Della, for hosting this session today with us about Doughnut Economics. I would like to invite everyone to come along to our next session, which will continue the conversation about economics with Helena Norberg-Hodge. So please check out the emails that come to you about that, and also in the Network Hub. This session, if I know some of you came a little bit later and asked whether there's a recording. Yes, the recording will come out very soon and will include all of the links that people have been sharing here in the chat. And I'd like to encourage anyone who'd like to continue the conversation to use our network space to have conversations there, to drop extra resources, to ask more questions. And Della, if there's a contact detail for you particularly, if anyone wants to follow up with you directly, where's the best place for that?
I mean, my Capra Course email is fine for that.
Perfect. Okay.
So we can put that in the follow-up email.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Della, and thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for the great conversation that followed the presentation. I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, wherever you're calling in from. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you all. Great conversation, all great questions. Thank you.